Peace Operations and Human Rights. The agenda is adopted. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the following briefers to participate in this meeting. Ms. Michelle Bachelet, United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Mr. David Shearer, Special Representative to the Secretary-General for South Sudan and Head of the United Nations Mission in South Sudan, and Mr. Kitenge, President of the NGO group LOTUS. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of item 2 of the agenda. I wish to draw the attention of Council members to document S/2020/604, a letter dated 26 June 2020 from the Permanent Representative of Germany to the United Nations, addressed to the Secretary-General, transmitting a concept note on the item under consideration. So, we are very fortunate to be able to have High Commissioner Michelle Bachelet, currently in Chile, with us. A most audible voice in times when human rights violations are happening across the world. Thank you very much for briefing the Council. I now give the floor to High Commissioner Bachelet.
Thank you, Madam President. Distinguished President of the Council, Excellencies, I want to thank the government of Germany for convening this debate on peace operations and human rights at a time of far-reaching challenges. As COVID-19 continues to gather pace, its impacts on health, societies, and economy threaten development and amplify or create new grievances and tensions. As you just mentioned, Madam President, this Council's resolution S/2020/607 rightly recognizes the particularly devastating impact of the pandemic on countries affected by conflict and humanitarian crisis. And I welcome its strong call for a global ceasefire for all situations on the Council's agenda. I trust it will also spark broader and more coordinated global action to mitigate and prevent the pandemic's impact in the present and in the future. The Council has often stressed that conflict prevention must be grounded in respect for and protection of human rights. In other words, human rights are central to the Council's mandate to maintain international peace and security. This principle has been consistently implemented through the integration of human rights in the mandates of peace operation in the gravest crisis threatening the world. And currently, 12 UN peace operations, 6 peacekeeping, and 6 special political missions have human rights components. These human rights components on the ground powerfully contribute to better protection. They bring missions closer to the people they served and foster the capacities of the governments to advance inclusive development, rule of law, and peace. In this context, the importance of the Secretary General's call to action for human rights cannot be overemphasized. Drawing on the respective expertise of peace operations' different components, the call to action aims to strengthen their collective efforts to carry out missions' mandate in increasingly complex environments. Its proposed agenda for protection will be an important element, ensuring that human rights serve as a shared and effective basis for the UN system's work and reinforcing the collective engagement, contribution, and responsibility of all components of peace operation to advance human rights. Only action to address the human rights violations inflicted on people can prevent the recurrence of conflict. And this is the work that human rights component of peace operations are mandated and trained to do, by detecting and addressing the inequalities and grievances that underlie specific conflict. As the COVID crisis deepens, challenges societies, economies, and institutions in every region, this work by human rights component to support peace operations delivery on their mandate and to address root causes of conflict and instability is becoming even more crucial. Madam President, monitoring and reporting by human rights component shapes early warning of developments that threaten to destabilize the specific situation. Today, this work includes assessment of the effectiveness and enforcement of COVID-19 containment measures, identification of the pandemic's impact on vulnerable groups, particularly internally displaced people, refugees, and women, an assessment of the impact on a specific economic, social, and cultural rights, monitoring of increases in stigmatization, discrimination, and hate speech related to the pandemic, as well as conflict-related violation by all parties, are also essential to efforts to highlight, address, and prevent further human rights violations. The impartial monitoring and reporting of human rights component and their engagement with the parties to conflict, state institutions, and civil society underpin the political good offices of every mission. In other words, human rights component have an essential role in contributing to the overall objective of peace operations to support political and peace process. We see this dynamic in peace operations across the world. In Afghanistan, the human rights component reporting on the protection of civilians have helped to build the mission's role as a credible and impartial interlocutor, an open door with parties to the conflict. The mission recently called on all parties to redouble efforts at protecting civilians and de-escalating the conflict to save lives and create a conducive environment for the upcoming peace talks. In the Central African Republic, human rights staff have demonstrated their importance to conflict prevention, notably through their work on hate speech and support for judicial and non-judicial mechanisms for accountability, including the innovative mechanism of the Special Criminal Court. In Libya, accountability mechanisms for addressing past violations and preventing ongoing ones are essential to follow up to the Berlin process and to address continuing conflict and lawlessness. The adoption by the Human Rights Council of a fact-finding mission is an example of the support that human rights mechanism can bring to accountability and conflict prevention efforts. In South Sudan, the Human Rights Division's work to fight impunity helps to highlight crucial gaps in accountability and the effect of those gaps in fueling ongoing violence and impeding reconciliation efforts. In Sudan, the 2019 Constitutional Declaration adopted by the transition government is centered on human rights. The recently established United Nations Integrated Transition Assistance Mission in Sudan, UNITAMS, and OHCHR's office in the country will support the government's efforts to build inclusive institutions that address the root causes of conflict and rebuild on stronger ground. In Iraq, our monitoring and reporting on human rights violations committed since the start of the popular demonstration in October last year has called attention to cases of abductions, disappearances, torture, and killings of demonstrators. Together with targeted advocacy, this has contributed to significant restraint by the security forces during the recent renewal of protests and the planned establishment of a national fact-finding committee. Together with the government's acknowledgement of the need for accountability, these are important steps toward the future prevention for similar acts and the Iraqi people's confidence in the authorities. Madam President, Excellencies, human rights staff in peace operations also assist in strengthening the capacity of national human rights and rule of law institutions. In Haiti and in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the UN police and the human rights component of MINJUST and MONUSCO have jointly worked with national authorities to strengthen the offices of the Inspector General to address cases of human rights violation. In the DRC, support to mobile courts have led to significant progress in tackling impunity, while mobile investigation teams provide key analysis of specific situations. In Ituri, this reporting has led the mission to adopt standing combat deployments, boosting protection of internally displaced people. More broadly, this work underpins the mission's conflict prevention strategy by shaping work to address the root causes of conflict and intercommunal violence. Human rights component also work to assist management of risk related to mandate implementation, notably by supporting implementation of the human rights due diligence policy on UN support to non-UN security forces. This policy, with the Council support, has significantly improved the UN's work on governance and security. Excellencies, this Council has been increasingly engaged in developments at the regional level, mandating region-wide engagement to counter security threats, including related to terrorism. In this operation, there are often higher risks for the civilian population, and grounding operations in respect for human rights and international law is crucial to their success. In addition to the partnerships my office is building with the African Union, the compliance framework approach we have developed constitutes a comprehensive package of prevention, mitigation, response, and remedial measures that further operationalize the UN's work on protection of civilians. We have been supporting the G5 Joint Force operationalization of this framework since 2018, with the main objective of preventing harm to civilians during military and counter-terrorism operations. I commend the G5 for being the first sub-regional armed force committed to implementing such a compliance framework. Further efforts are needed for full operationalization. This should include strong focus on the protection of vulnerable populations, including women, children, and internally displaced people. These measures are crucial to ensuring that the joint force is effective and in fulfilling its mandate and in inspiring confidence in the community it serves. Excellencies, as the Secretary General's call to action states, there is no better guarantee for prevention than for member states to meet their human rights responsibilities. Conversely, unresolved human rights issues and underfinanced implementation of human rights recommendations result in a fragile, ultimately unattainable peace and forced prolonged UN engagement in the country. At a time of multidimensional global and regional crisis, we need redoubled investment in rules-based international structures that serve the common good by identifying and addressing grievances before they fester into violence. Adequate financing for Security Council human rights mandate for peace operation is among the soundest and most cost-effective investment in the interest of all. In addition to resources, robust political support for this component is needed, expressed through the voice of this Council. The UN peace operations are among the organization's most significant achievements and a powerful tool to protect and promote human rights. They need resources and your strong political support to bind together all UN operations around a common effective approach to crisis, from prevention to recovery. I thank you, Madam President.
So, High Commissioner, thank you for your briefing. Joining us from South Sudan, Special Representative David Shearer is our next briefer for today's session. He has just recently pointed out how violence in South Sudan is used to sort out power arrangements, fueling human rights violations. Thank you very much, Special Representative, for taking the time and presenting a mission-specific perspective. I now give the floor to Special Representative Shearer.
Thank you very much, Madam President, and it's very good to be with you today, and thank you for this very important topic. Human rights for UNMISS is our core business. It's one of the 4 pillars in our mandate, but it also occupies a cross-cutting role right across the entire mission, and it's central to both peace and security and the protection of civilians. As UNMISS, we're often looked to provide a definitive account of events, to speak out on behalf of others about what has happened, because others can't. They can't do that, and so we do it. As all of you know, because I've met many of you in this chamber before, we have discussed the poor record that South Sudan has with regard to human rights, that particularly followed on after the conflict in 2013. And the targeting and killing of innocent civilians has led to over 2 million people being refugees and about 1.9 million people being displaced. People don't just do that themselves. They do that because they are fearful of their lives or the lives of their families. Sexual violence has also been extremely prevalent here. It's something that we have talked about in the Council before, and there are many cases that have been documented and highly publicised. I won't go into those now because we've talked about it before and you have the details. What I'd really like to talk about and to address is how the mission is meeting those challenges and working through those. Our actions and our work is tied to what we can do to make a difference. How can we change behaviour? What will bring sustainable improvements? And yes, of course, human rights is about documenting abuses and calling out violators and abusers. And that's part of what we need to do, and it's a very important part of what we need to do. But it's not sufficient in itself, and it's often a one-off action that it makes an impact but then slowly dissipates and with no follow-up. And so in UNMISS, what we try and do is to group our approach into 3 broad streams. And I want to just go through those very quickly, one by one. First of all is the documentation and holding abusers to account. Recently, and over the last couple of years, we have restructured our Human Rights Division to include a rapid response team that can respond to events that occurs, and we can provide definitive reporting on something that's particularly relevant and topical. And that's very important to the victims because their stories are told and their pain is acknowledged, and particularly if we're able to respond quickly, it also ensures that the perpetrators of that abuse are identified and show that we are watching them and hopefully following through to ensure that there are consequences for what happened. Our reporting is conservative and it's careful. And the reason we do this is because the easiest way to be caught out is to get something wrong. And so we want to make sure that absolutely everything that we do is we go through with a fine-tooth comb and make sure that it's absolutely right, so people can trust it, and we can't be taken advantage of if we get anything a bit wrong. We also ensure that all our reports are sent to the aggrieved parties, or the parties we are targeting, so they have the chance of being able to respond. And we take those responses into consideration. We may change the report or we may choose not to, but we give them that opportunity. We've had a number of different reports that have come out across the country. Western Equatoria, which was documented opposition abuses. In Bentiu, in the north of the country, it was government abuses. But we've also looked at freedom of expression, the role of and the rights of women to have their rights respected after they've gone through this trauma. What treatment is there? What psychological backup is there? We're not just talking about people who have perhaps been sexually abused and then left. It's also about following up and making sure that those other services are available. Their right is to have those services available as well. And we've also taken out and singled out particular individuals that have carried out particular atrocities. And I just want to mention one of those, a particular individual called Gordon Kong, who in 2018 orchestrated the most horrific pattern of abuse in Unity in the middle of South Sudan. When he was spoken to by our Chief of Human Rights, he defended his actions by saying that he had to teach people a strong lesson, otherwise they would continue to do that, continue to attack him or to continue to insult him. That action that he took out included hanging women from trees, burning old people in their homes, raping hundreds of women across that area, and of course killing and displacing thousands and thousands of other people. That is the sort of person that we want to acknowledge and have sanctioned and make sure that he cannot get away with those sorts of abuses when they are absolutely and categorically proven to be carried out by him. That's not the end of the story, documenting those sorts of abuses. And this is the second issue that I want to look at, and that's about ending impunity and ensuring accountability, and sustainably ensuring that accountability. It's the hallmark of all civilized societies that if you commit crimes or abuses, you will be tried, and if you're found guilty, you'll be punished. Ending impunity, therefore, in South Sudan is very, very important. And for a large part, that means that we need to make sure that the justice system functions. And ensuring the justice system works is becoming now a critical part of our role. It's involving not only our human rights, but also our police and our rule of law, and right across the mission. We have been involved in supporting mobile courts as a first step towards establishing more permanent courts. And the first mobile court happened about 18 months ago in Bentiu, where a number of, particularly people who have perpetrated offences against women, sexual violations, were put on trial. And I was told about one of our lawyers who was in one of these, watching these, was saying that she was in the courtroom when a 15-year-old girl was brought in who had been gang raped by 4 people from the area. She stood there, and these 4 people were brought in, these 4 men were brought in, very cocky, very sure of themselves, very arrogant. They saw her witnesses, and their faces fell. And at the end of that trial, all 4 of them were convicted for prison sentences ranging from 4 years to 12 years. That had a sobering impact on the committing of sexual violations and human rights in that area. And those mobile courts have done an enormous amount of good to ensure that impunity is beginning to end in that area. The same lawyer told me that a few days later she saw the queue outside the courtroom and asked, why are these 47 women, she counted, standing outside this courtroom? And the answer was that these 47 women were the witnesses who were queuing up to give evidence against the next case of people who are being brought in front of the courts for sexual abuse as well. So our role here is not just about mobile courts. It's about strengthening the police, the justice system, the prosecution, the judges, right through to the Ministry of Justice. And what I will say that in South Sudan, we're pushing against an open door. We have had extraordinary cooperation from the justice system in supporting us and helping us to help them to be able to bring bring that justice system up to speed. The third and last area that I wanted to talk about was engagement with government. Yes, we can criticise the government, but we also need to engage with them. Currently, we have 3 action plans with the government for both the military, the police, and the opposition military to create the conditions within their forces that will bring about a respect for human rights. We get invited regularly now to help train those military contingents, and that's a step in the right direction because we're getting in at the ground floor, so to speak, with those many of those people who are the officers and the people who are in charge. Lastly, I just wanted to make a mention of how we work. As I said, human rights is not just about a division, it's a cross-cutting theme that runs right through our mission. Our Human Rights Division has a MOU that we have signed with our force. So we understand by doing that, it was about understanding where each is coming from, but also how each other operates. And if you ask why we need to do that, to remember that peacekeepers every 12 months rotate. And so we rather than having to go through the same thing over and over, we have this documented way of working between our human rights, our force, and therefore our force and how it can respect human rights and ensure that human rights standards are adhered to. And then lastly, I want to mention the Women's Protection Advisor and the Child Protection Unit, which I haven't had time to do here, which obviously, as their name suggests, have specific roles and responsibilities for those particular issues. And last but not least, I'm just going to zoom out a bit, because beside me here is Eugene Ninandera, who is our head of our Human Rights Division, and in a month and a half's time will be retiring after 10 years with the UN and a very long career in human rights as an activist and as a minister in his home state of Burundi. And I just wanted to say, in front of the Council, thank you very much, Eugene, for everything that you've done for setting human rights on the map here for us in South Sudan. Thank you.
I thank the Special Representative for his briefing. In a second, I will give the floor to our briefer representing the civil society, Mr. Dima Kitenge. We are very grateful that he joins our meeting from the Democratic Republic of Congo, where he is a human rights defender and president of LOTUS. Before he starts, please let me clarify that Mr. Kitenge will address the Council in French. Je voudrais souhaiter très chaleureusement la bienvenue à Monsieur Dima Kitenge, qui représente la société civile de la République démocratique du Congo. Monsieur Kitenge est un ardent défenseur des droits de l'homme. Nous sommes heureux qu'il ait accepté notre invitation. Mr. Kitenge, you now have the floor.
Monsieur Kitenge, on ne vous entend pas. Il faut ouvrir votre microphone, s'il vous plaît. Est-ce que vous voyez un petit microphone sur votre écran? Il faut enlever le rouge. Il faut l'ouvrir, votre microphone, s'il vous plaît. Brian, can we just pause?
Monsieur Kitenge, vous avez la parole, s'il vous plaît.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Mesdames et Messieurs les membres du Conseil de sécurité, je vous remercie de m'avoir accordé l'opportunité de m'adresser à vous aujourd'hui sur la situation en République démocratique du Congo. La République démocratique du Congo, une année et demie après la passation pacifique du pouvoir et l'avènement du président Tshisekedi, connaît une situation particulière qui suscite à la fois de l'espoir, mais aussi des inquiétudes. Si des actes concrets et permanents de changement n'accompagnent pas les discours politiques tenus tant sur le plan national qu'international. À la faveur du nouveau régime issu des élections du 30 décembre 2018, l'on reconnaît l'ouverture de l'espace public à plusieurs partis et regroupements politiques, les retours au pays des exilés politiques, la libération de plusieurs prisonniers politiques, l'ouverture de médias privés fermés et malheureusement de nos jours le comportement de certaines forces de l'ordre. Au niveau sécuritaire, sur les territoires sous contrôle du gouvernement, les forces de sécurité et de défense font face à un problème d'unité de commandement, de dysfonctionnement, d'insuffisance des moyens et d'inefficacité à défendre l'intégrité territoriale, menacée actuellement par des incursions des armées des pays voisins sur le sol congolais, mais aussi et surtout à sécuriser les personnes et leurs biens. En Ituri, l'activisme du groupe armé, la Codeco, par la commission des atrocités graves contre les populations locales constitue une menace sérieuse à la paix et à la sécurité dans cette région. Les difficultés de mise en place d'une politique efficace et cohérente de la démobilisation, de désarmement et de réinsertion sociale des groupes armés sont des défis importants au processus de pacification de la partie est du pays. Dans ces contextes fragiles, la situation des droits humains se trouve impactée par la commission de violations fréquentes de droits humains, l'impunité de la plupart de leurs auteurs et les difficultés de mise en œuvre de réformes nécessaires et urgentes pour l'amélioration de la situation et l'avènement d'un état de droit en RDC. À titre d'exemple, les arrestations et détentions illégales, les pratiques de la torture et des traitements inhumains et dégradants par des services de l'ordre de sécurité, les menaces, les attaques et les arrestations de défenseurs de droits humains, une cinquantaine depuis l'état d'urgence suite à la pandémie de Covid-19, comme des violences sexuelles dans ces circonstances spéciales, se commettent à plusieurs endroits du pays à l'absence de mesures efficaces de leur cessation et de la poursuite de leurs auteurs. La lutte contre l'impunité et la corruption, inscrite en priorité dans les programmes quinquennales du mandat du président Tshisekedi, se heurte au manque de mise en place d'une politique claire et cohérente en la matière. Les droits économiques et sociaux des populations, déjà difficiles à réaliser, viennent d'être fragilisés par la pandémie de Covid-19, car non seulement le budget de l'État est revu à la baisse, mais aussi la violation massive de droits au travail, à la santé et à l'éducation. Poursuivant sa mission dans le cadre de la mise en œuvre du mandat de la MONUSCO, adopté en décembre 2019 par le Conseil de sécurité, les bureaux conjoints des Nations Unies aux droits de l'homme MONUSCO effectuent le monitoring des violations de droits humains commises sur l'ensemble du pays, renforcent les capacités de travail, de promotion et de protection de ses partenaires, aussi bien ceux de l'État et de la société civile, contribuent à la protection des défenseurs de droits humains que nous sommes, suit et conseille les actions de lutte contre l'impunité, les réformes nécessaires, ainsi qu'il mène le plaidoyer auprès des décideurs congolais et des partenaires de la RDC. Bien que limité par des ressources et ne se trouvant plus sur l'ensemble du pays depuis la fermeture des bureaux de la MONUSCO dans 7 villes de la RDC, le travail du Bureau conjoint des Nations Unies pour les droits de l'homme est appuyé et soutenu par des organisations de la société civile qui lui fournissent régulièrement des informations sur les violations des droits humains, participent à la consolidation des données en cette matière spécifique et aux diverses formations dispensées par ces antennes. Des ONG sont soutenues par le Bureau conjoint des Nations Unies aux droits de l'homme, MONUSCO, dans leurs actions en justice contre les auteurs des violations des droits humains, dans leur plaidoyer à divers niveaux, mais aussi lorsque, dans l'exercice de leur travail, leurs animateurs sont menacés ou poursuivis en justice par des autorités locales ou nationales. La pandémie de Covid-19 en République démocratique du Congo a affecté le travail des ONG de défense des droits humains par la réduction des moyens financiers, humains, matériels, les difficultés de déplacement et de communication. Ainsi, le travail des collectes des informations, de formation et des plaidoyers est réduit. Le Bureau conjoint des Nations Unies, MONUSCO aux droits de l'homme, soutient les ONG dans le partage des communications, des moyens de communication, la continuité du plaidoyer par la facilitation à l'accès à ces moyens logistiques et le relais de leurs préoccupations auprès des autorités congolaises et des partenaires de la RDC, mais aussi et surtout sur la sensibilisation des populations sur le respect des droits humains fondamentaux dans le contexte de la pandémie de la COVID-19. Dans ces diverses activités menées avec le Bureau conjoint des Nations Unies aux droits de l'homme, MONUSCO, ma propre contribution et celle de notre organisation ont été utiles et pertinentes. À titre d'exemple, l'on mentionne les rapports mapping publiés par les Nations Unies où le groupe LOTUS est mentionné plusieurs fois. Sur la protection des défenseurs des droits humains, non seulement moi-même, j'ai bénéficié plus d'une fois de l'assistance de la MONUSCO, Unité des droits de l'homme, affaires politiques et composantes militaires, pour ma sécurité et ma délocalisation dans les locaux de la MONUSCO lors de menaces sérieuses, dans les menaces sérieuses sur ma vie à cause de mon engagement en faveur des droits humains. L'appui logistique et technique de la MONUSCO pour ma participation aux rencontres nationales et internationales sur la paix et les droits humains, ainsi que sur les échanges des analyses relatives aux enjeux politiques nationaux, sont des enrichissements réciproques qui ont contribué non seulement au renforcement des capacités des ONG congolaises, mais aussi à l'appropriation des actions de la MONUSCO par la société congolaise en général. En outre, il est aussi important de souligner le travail des organisations de la société civile congolaise dans l'interface entre la MONUSCO et les populations congolaises, ainsi que sur la sensibilisation des communautés locales, de la jeunesse des milieux scolaires et universitaires sur les différents mandats de la MONUSCO en langue locale. Ces différentes activités du Bureau conjoint des Nations Unies aux droits de l'homme MONUSCO dans les domaines des droits humains ont permis aux populations congolaises d'appréhender la transversalité des droits humains au sein des missions de paix des Nations Unies et l'approche globale et intégrée dans la consolidation de la paix dans une société post-conflit comme la RDC. De ce qui précède, il me paraît utile d'attirer l'attention du Conseil de sécurité de l'ONU sur l'importance de renforcer le dialogue politique avec les autorités à divers plans, au plan national et local, la protection des civils et les moyens d'action, de renforcer les moyens d'action de l'unité des droits humains de la MONUSCO. Ainsi, les recommandations suivantes sont à privilégier pour l'efficacité de la MONUSCO en général. 1. Le soutien à la mission des bons offices de la représentante spéciale du secrétaire général des Nations Unies en République démocratique du Congo. 2. Le renforcement de la présence et des ressources du Bureau conjoint des Nations Unies MONUSCO dans l'ensemble du pays, mais aussi dans les agglomérations où les bureaux de la MONUSCO ont été fermés. 3. Fournir un appui à la professionnalisation et à la responsabilisation du secteur de la sécurité, armée, police en priorité, y compris au travers des formations sur les droits humains et la mise en œuvre de la politique de diligence voulue des Nations Unies en matière de droits de l'homme dans son aspect filtrage des éléments qui entravent la réforme du secteur de la sécurité en tant que responsable de violations de droits humains. 4. Continuer l'accompagnement des autorités congolaises en matière de protection des civils par des moyens efficaces et adaptés à la situation. 5. L'installation et le renforcement des unités des composantes des affaires politiques et de la radio-capille dans les agglomérations où le bureau de la MONUSCO ont été fermés. 6. L'appui à la lutte contre l'impunité et la corruption dans le respect des normes de procès équitables. 7. Encourager les efforts de justice et d'établissement de la vérité pour les victimes de violations graves des droits humains. 8. Le soutien à l'organisation des élections locales, tant réclamées par la population. 9. Le soutien aux réformes des institutions d'appui à la démocratie telles que la Commission électorale nationale indépendante, la Commission nationale des droits de l'homme. 10. Le soutien aux organisations de la société civile congolaise en général. 11. L'implication et la consultation de la société civile dans le processus d'évaluation et la stratégie de sortie de la MONUSCO. 12. S'assurer que dans le processus de départ de la MONUSCO du pays, une stratégie de sortie reposant sur des critères objectifs ou des benchmarks ayant trait au contexte en RDC soient établis. Merci de votre attention. Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente, de m'accorder la parole. Je suis à votre entière disposition pour les questions d'éclaircissement sur les sujets que...
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Kitenge. I thank you for your briefing. I now give the floor to the members of the Security Council. As first Security Council member on the list, I shall now make a statement in capacity as Federal Minister of Defense of Germany. Excellencies, I would like to express my gratitude to the briefers for their impressive presentations. Germany is delighted to chair an open debate on this very important topic. Eleanor Roosevelt was the only woman on the drafting team on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. About the achievement of human rights, she famously said, "The immediate test is not only the extent to which human rights and freedoms have already been achieved, but the direction in which the world is moving." That was in 1948. Today, we have all reason to ask ourselves, is the world moving in the right direction? The answer is clear. The task that was handed to all of us, to make human rights universal, is far from complete. It will remain incomplete as long as universality of human rights is being questioned and undermined even inside the United Nations. It will remain incomplete as long as borders are being violated and moved at will. It will remain incomplete as long as the freedom of speech and the freedom of assembly are illegally curtailed and withheld. My main concern today is how human rights and peacekeeping are related to each other. This is of high importance for the United Nations. Ladies and gentlemen, when we look at war zones around the world, it is a notable fact that the vast majority of victims are still civilians. Often, they are intentionally targeted by the conflict parties. As a defense minister, let me be very clear. Human rights have to be a first concern in peace operations. They can never make way for operational effectiveness. Ultimately, military success is only possible as long as fundamental rights are firmly defended. And also, in our current situation, during a pandemic, we have to be attentive towards the universal human rights of every individual human being. If human rights are to mean something, anything, this Council has a role to play and a responsibility to fulfill. This Council has a special obligation to guarantee the protection of human rights in its very own UN peacekeeping operations. We need to dedicate significant resources to the human rights elements of these missions. Fostering human rights is part of the capacity building and advisory functions of UN missions. This must happen in close cooperation with state authorities. The protection of human rights is essential to building resilient and inclusive societies, so they can move towards sustainable peace. Dear colleagues, how blue helmets conduct their operations has a direct influence on how UN peacekeeping and the United Nations itself is being judged by people in every corner of the world. Peacekeepers function as role models. That's why human rights aspects must be recognized from the very beginning, by already including them in the training and the evaluation of troops before they deploy. I pledge today, Germany will make human rights training a mandatory element in all peacekeeping training efforts we provide to the United Nations. just as we instruct and train our own German troops before they are deployed. Furthermore, later this year, Germany, as an Action for Peacekeeping champion, will hold a high-level conference on peacekeeping, human rights, and the protection of civilians. We want to deepen the debate on the issues at stake. We want to jointly develop practical proposals for the UN Secretariat and for all troop contributing countries. The goal is to better implement the human rights tasks within operations. We will also feed the results of two brand new German studies into this conference. One on the protection of civilians in peacekeeping, the other one on how to increase the number of women in peace operations. Women are absolutely essential for operations. Only diverse teams can make peacekeeping truly successful. Finally, let me thank High Commissioner Bachelet, Special Representative Shearer, and Mr. Kitenge for their dedicated work. Their efforts are particularly remarkable given today's special conditions, where conflicts continue in spite of a pandemic and in spite of the UN Secretary-General's appeal for global ceasefire. It is a sign to hope that last week the Security Council adopted a resolution in support of the Secretary-General's appeal. Thank you. I resume my function as President of the Council. I now give the floor to His Excellency Lord Tariq Ahmad of Wimbledon, Minister of State for the Commonwealth, the United Nations and South Asia of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland.
Thank you, Madam President, for convening today's important debate. I'm also grateful to High Commissioner Bachelet, and it's lovely to see her again today and hear from her directly, as well as Special Representative Shearer and Mr. Kitenge for their insightful and constructive briefings. And may I, from the outset, align myself totally with your words, Madam President, in recognizing the important role and the emphasis we must lay on women peacekeepers and the importance of women peace mediators, because the realization of human rights can only truly be realized if we have all of us, women, pivotal and at the center of peacekeeping and peace and stability around the world. As I was listening to our expert briefers, their insight from the ground indeed reminds us there can be no lasting peace nor sustainable development without the fundamental respect for human rights and the rule of law. This is an often repeated refrain in this council and a concept we each endorsed in the Declaration of Shared Commitments on UN peacekeeping operations. Yet, it is a vision that we all too often fail to realize. And I want to turn on the situation in Mali as an example. Through this council, we have mandated MINUSMA to complete three vital human rights functions. Firstly, to act to prevent serious human rights violations and attacks on civilians, in line with the UN Protection of Civilians policy. Second, to monitor, investigate, and report abuses or violations. And thirdly, and importantly, to support Malian efforts to protect and promote human rights, and importantly, fight impunity. This role is fundamental to prevent a further erosion of trust between the state and the people, and thereby help to ultimately stabilize the country. The integrated response at the heart of the mission's adaptation plan, with better coordination between military, police, and civilian components, should enable MINUSMA to respond more effectively to reported abuses. It is needed. Despite our best efforts, reporting from High Commissioner Bachelet's office and the UN peacekeeping mission, we still continue to they continue to highlight persistent human rights abuses and violations in Mali and indeed across the Sahel. MINUSMA, like any peace operation around the world, can only ever be part of the solution. It is incumbent on all national governments to protect and promote human rights, investigate allegations of violations and abuses openly and transparently, and hold those responsible to account. When national governments are unwilling to act, and the international community can, we should always be prepared to deploy the full range of tools at our disposal and to hold perpetrators to account, including the use of sanctions. Strong coordination and collaboration between all relevant parts of the United Nations machine, the Malian government, should enable them to strengthen their capacity to both protect and promote human rights, and importantly, the rule of law. Madam President, UN peace operations have an obligation not only to monitor human rights violations and abuses, but also to ensure their support to other security forces is human rights compliant. The UN's human rights due diligence policy sets this out very clearly. It is also an incentive to those security forces to deploy and strengthen their own safeguards. I encourage our missions to show more clearly how they are applying it. Every member of a mission's personnel, from the special representatives and force commanders to contingent troops, should understand their role and responsibilities to both protect and promote human rights. We must ensure missions have the specialist capabilities they need to respond effectively to specific human rights challenges in the field. The devastating impact of conflict-related sexual violence in South Sudan, where nearly a quarter of the reported cases involve children, is an unwelcome reminder of the abuses that take place and of why we must do better and do more. Reporting tells us that survivors continue to struggle. They continue to struggle to access medical and mental health care. Although I am encouraged that the government of South Sudan has acknowledged these concerns and has expressed a willingness to work together with UNMISS to combat sexual and gender-based violence. Let me assure all that the United Kingdom is absolutely committed to supporting survivors, including children born of conflict-related sexual violence, and to holding all perpetrators to account. And we call upon all council members to support the inclusion of vital human rights experts in our missions, including more gender, child protection, and, importantly, women's protection advisors. To conclude, Madam President, human rights are all about safeguarding the dignity and unleashing the true potential of each and every person around the globe. That is why states that fail to protect and promote human rights are less prosperous, they are less stable and less able to meet the demands of their people, and more likely to remain on the agenda of this Council. Human rights intertwine with all aspects of UN peace operations. Therefore, the focus of this Council must be unflinching. We must promote, protect, strengthen, and realize human rights wherever we work. It's in our interests. It's in all interests, in the interests of all people. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Excellency, for your statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Febrian Alfianto Woodyard, Deputy Foreign Minister for Multilateral Cooperation of Indonesia.
Madam President, I would like to join others in welcoming Your Excellency Minister Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer, and thank you for presiding this open debate on peacekeeping operation and human rights. I also thank all briefers for the insight to the issues. Promotion and protection of human rights have been part of the mandate of most peacekeeping operations today. As the largest troop and police contributor in the Security Council, with more than 2,800 personnel serving in 8 missions, Indonesia has always emphasized the imperative of peacekeeping mandate to be clear, specific, and focused. This is to ensure that peacekeeping dedicate their resources to tasks that matter the most of the people. After all, the primary objective of peacekeeping operation is to promote peace through political solution. In fostering measures to achieve the goal, allow me to focus on 3 pertinent points. First, the importance of strengthening national capacity. The primary responsibility to promote and protect citizen human rights rests on the host country. We need to ensure adequate protection capacity of the host country to prevent the risk of human rights violation. The United Nations should assist the conflict-affected countries to strengthen their capacity. At this point, peacekeeping can play an important enabling role by providing technical assistance and support to relevant institutions in host countries. Indonesia has rigorously prepared and trained its peacekeepers, including in the area of human rights, and they stand ready to assist host country in building their protection capacity. However, realizing the culture of respect for human rights is a long-term endeavor. Hence, it should be a part of the holistic peace-building efforts which go beyond the life of peacekeeping operation. Second, the implementation of human rights mandates require whole-of-mission approach. The relief human rights mandate, particularly during the COVID-19 pandemic, is not easy. Close coordination between human rights officers in the mission with military, police, other civilian components, as well as UN country team is the key. Engagement with the relevant national stakeholders and civil society is also crucial. It is also our task to ensure the safety and security of our peacekeepers while conducting human rights mandate. Our peacekeepers should not only be well equipped with relevant knowledge and capacity, but also be supported with necessary equipment and infrastructure. Third, the role of women peacekeepers. It is evident that women peacekeepers have made valuable contribution to the mission performance, including in the promotion and protection of human rights. Their unique approaches in engaging the local community, in particular women and children, enable them to prevent and address human rights violations more effectively. For Indonesia, community engagement is crucial to win the heart and mind of the population, which is key for the success of peacekeeping. We are proud to be among top contributors of women peacekeepers. Currently, we have 159 women peacekeepers serving in 7 missions, including UNMISS and MONUSCO. These represent an increase of more than 50% compared to last year. We are also committed to prepare and train them with necessary skills and knowledge, including on human rights. Going forward, Indonesia will continue to advocate for greater participation and role of women peacekeepers as part of our strong commitment to advance the role of women as agents of peace. We underscore the responsibility of this Council in enabling lasting solution to conflict. The more society is helped to move away from violence and conflict, the stronger its commitment to peace and human rights protection will be. Before I conclude, Madam President, allow me to say short remarks in Indonesian to convey our condolences to the family of the Indonesian peacekeeping operation personnel recently passed away on MONUSCO. Atas nama pemerintah Indonesia, izinkan saya ucapkan belasungkawa kepada keluarga Pelda Anumerta Rahmat Wahyudi yang gugur dalam penugasannya sebagai anggota misi perdamaian PBB di Democratic Republic of the Congo. Almarhum adalah pahlawan, bukan hanya untuk Indonesia, tapi untuk dunia. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Rodiat for his statement. And now I give the floor to the representative of Niger.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, we know how much importance your country, Germany, attaches to the issue of promoting human rights in peace operations. We are therefore not surprised that this topic is on the Council's agenda during your presidency. Allow me to welcome the presence of Mrs. Michelle Bachelet, High Commissioner for Human Rights, and Mr. David Shearer, Special Representative of the Secretary General for South Sudan. I thank them most sincerely for the relevance and quality of their briefings, which have highlighted the importance of taking that aspect into account in the Security Council's agenda. Thanks also to Mr. Dismas Kitenge for being with us today. The issue of human rights in peace operations is important in several respects. First, because it is inseparable from peace and security, as Secretary General of the United Nations recalled during the debate on this issue on 17 April 2019. These peace operations have today become one of the most valuable instruments for the preservation of international peace and security. It is also so in the context of the current global health crisis, which affects the implementation of the mandates of UN operations, in which the protection of civilians itself, based on the protection and promotion of human rights, has become an important issue. Interest in human rights in peace operations has become increasingly important on the one hand because of the profound changes that have taken place in recent years in theaters of operations, which have become more dangerous than in the past, and on the other hand, because of the intervention of non-state actors, including armed terrorist groups in those theaters. Niger welcomes the special attention that the United Nations has been paying since 2008 to the human rights dimension, which has become an essential component of its peacekeeping and peace-building operations. My country welcomes the results achieved in this area in all United Nations operations, especially in the area of the protection of civilians, which has significantly contributed to providing security for vulnerable populations living in conflict and post-conflict zones. If the missions were to achieve the objectives assigned to them in their mandate, they should work in synergy with local, regional, and international actors whose knowledge and expertise cannot be ignored. With this in mind, Niger calls on the human rights structures within the missions to ensure better coordination with the structures of the host country as well as with those of the sub-region in order to better conduct investigations into alleged cases of human rights violations. It is fortunate that the most recent Resolution 2531, renewing the mandate of MINUSMA, took that necessity into account. One example that I would like to cite here of taking into account the human rights dimension is that of the G5 Sahel Joint Force, an expression of the political will of the 5 countries to confront the scourge of terrorism that they face. As you know, the G5 Sahel countries, whose joint force is supported by MINUSMA, have subscribed to a human rights compliance framework which obliges their personnel to respect the rights of the civilian population on the ground. Of course, in the context of this asymmetrical war, existing training must be continued and strengthened, and particular attention must be paid to strengthening the police component through the inclusion of women or in its contingents. In that regard, my delegation is pleased to appreciate the great cooperation that exists between some peace operations and the defense and police forces of host countries with regard to training on issues related to the protection of civilians, women and children who are the main victims of abuses, including sexual violence during conflicts. The support provided to strengthen the judicial system and the management of prisons is a result of this good cooperation. In that regard, I am pleased to appreciate the work done in the Democratic Republic of the Congo by MONUSCO in cooperation with the FARDC and the Congolese National Police. While the training contingents on human rights issues is important, equally important is communication between the United Nations and troop contributing countries, which must make available contingents trained to serve in certain extreme conditions, such as in the forest in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and which have the capacity to communicate with the local population. Madam President, the protection of civilians, which today has become a crucial imperative and an integral part of the mandate of peace operations, must involve, in addition to state structures, the populations themselves, especially women and young people and opinion leaders, in order to avoid the confusions that have been deplored in the Central African Republic with MONUSCO in the context of the fights against the COVID-19 pandemic. It is together that we can maintain peace, and it is also together that we can build the architecture for the protection of civilians in conflict situations. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative for his statement, and now I give the floor to the representative of St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Thank you, Madam President. At the outset, St. Vincent and the Grenadines thanks the briefers for their remarks, and we commend the German presidency for convening this important discussion. Madam President, peace operations are some of the most effective tools at the disposal of our United Nations system to mitigate against the effects of violent conflict, promote stability, and lay the foundation for lasting peace and security. In pursuing these noble ends, peace operations provide key political functions in which conflict-affected states are reconfigured and social norms are realigned as new institutions are built and the authority of the state is reestablished. In this regard, the integration of human rights components within peace operations fosters a structural shift in which rule of law provisions, social norms, and political cultures that maximize the rights and privileges of all civilians become embedded in the post-conflict status quo. In this regard, we welcome the selfless sacrifices that all peacekeepers make in committing to this honorable purpose. While freedom remains universal in character, it is crucial that human rights components are not universalized in a manner that disregards local cultures and traditions, and thereby undermines host countries' capacities to curate the delicate seeds of peace. Indeed, there is no one-size-fits-all approach. Human rights components must be designed and integrated into peace operations in such a way that local customs and values are safeguarded, while the sovereignty, political independence, and territorial integrity of all states are respected. To this end, St. Vincent and the Grenadines welcomes the ongoing reforms to peacekeeping operations under Secretary General's A4P initiative, which brings nationally led political solutions to the forefront of our efforts to maintain international peace and security. Our delegation emphasizes the critical role of regional and sub-regional organizations in our quest for lasting peace. The engagement and leadership of the African Union on peace initiatives across the African continent is a pertinent example of how a regionalized focus may strengthen protections for rights and freedoms by accentuating the contextual realities of conflicts, improving community engagement, facilitating constructive dialogue, and building trust among stakeholders in accordance with the aspirations of the African Union Community's Agenda 2063. Madam President, We call upon the international community to renew its efforts to strengthen the capacities of all states, in line with national priorities and in accordance with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. This remains the primary blueprint for inclusive, people-centered growth and development, upon which greater freedoms can be made readily available to all, while root causes of conflicts are comprehensively addressed. In addressing root causes, it must be noted that abuses committed by all parties must be accounted for, and adequate restitution provided to victims and survivors. We have seen instances in the past where peacekeepers themselves have committed human rights violations against the very civilians they are mandated to protect. In Haiti, of sexual exploitation and abuse of women and children and other forms of violence committed against Haitian citizens have left deep-rooted traumas and a general distrust of the UN's engagement in the country, further magnifying a perception of illegitimacy born out of the peace operations' role in initiating the deadliest epidemic in the country's history. Haiti still grapples with the remnants of these protection failures today. Madam President, the quest for freedom and justice has always been and continues to remain a cornerstone on which our global civilization is advanced. Our delegation, therefore, considers it a moral imperative for all actors in the international community to promote political inclusion, social welfare, economic participation, and protection under the law for all persons, without discrimination of any kind. These are key pillars upon which lasting peace and prosperity is rendered, and peace operations play a critical role in assisting conflict-affected states to mend their social fabric and implement these fundamental safeguards. I thank you.
Thank you for this statement. And now I give the floor to the representative of Tunisia.
Thank you, Madam President. We are pleased, Honorable Minister, to see you chairing our meeting today. And we thank Germany for having chosen this important topic for our discussion at the Council. I welcome the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights and the SRSV for South Sudan and thank them for their briefings. I thank also the representative of the civil society for his presentation. Madam President, undoubtedly, human rights and international peace and security are intimately related. Discussing their interplay is not only relevant to the Council's work, but it is also crucial for its mandate. Unfortunately, history offers plenty of illustrations of how violation of human rights lead to hostilities and how in conflict situations individuals become even more vulnerable and subject to systematic abuses and atrocities. Conscious of these dynamics, the Security Council have been keen on including human rights dimension in the mandates of peace operations since the early 90s, thus enabling the UN peacekeeping operation and the special political mission to play a critical role in the protection of human rights through monitoring, reporting, and even intervening when necessary. We believe that such a role is crucial also to advance the peace processes in the countries emerging from years of violence and turmoil. It is highly important that the Council considers how best it can support peace operations in this field when discussing human rights aspects of individual missions' work during their periodic reviews. Among many options, Council members could reflect on how to mobilize more financial resources and better trained and more skilled personnel in peace operation to ensure higher performance on the human rights component. Cooperation between the DCCs and PCCs is important in this regard. While it is true that peace operations are doing their best within their mandates to protect human rights, it is obvious that such a task would require also ownership and appropriation from the local players, including governmental authorities and civil society. Promoting local human rights defenders will ensure that human rights remain protected even after missions draw down. Implementing capacity building programs in the host countries and raising awareness about human rights and peace nexus are crucial in this regard and should be considered as priority as well during mandate discussions. Close cooperation with the regional and sub-regional organizations and with local NGOs would be highly useful to tune the mission's human rights component with local realities and cultural particularities in the host countries. Moreover, we believe that women peacekeepers can access more effectively some segments of the population, such as women and children in conflict situations. They can be more instrumental in supporting victims of gender-based violence and violence against children, as well as in spreading the culture of human rights among local populations. To conclude, Madam President, Tunisia would like to flag that human rights should be at the core of all steps of conflict prevention, peacekeeping, and peace building. When the parties to a conflict respect human rights, it is often easier to end conflict and build bridges for peace. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Tunisia for his statement. And now I come to Vietnam. The floor is yours.
I thank you, Madam Minister, for presiding this important debate. We join others in thanking High Commissioner Michelle Bachelet, Mr. David Shearer, and Mr. Senga, Dismas, Kitenge for their informative briefings. Madam President, encouraging respect of human rights and fundamental freedoms for all regardless of race, sex, language, or religion is one among the primary purposes of the United Nations. I am inspired to acknowledge that since 1991, when the United Nations Observer Mission in El Salvador was mandated to verify the compliance by the party with the related agreements on the human rights, the peace operation of the United Nations have persistently contributed to the realization of this purpose. However, year after year, we continue to receive heart-wrenching reports of, among others, recruitments and use of children, and widespread of sexual and gender-based violence, or situations that brought about a vast number of IDPs that United Nations Peace Mission have had to grapple with. In this context, my delegation would like to stress the following point. First, about the role of host countries, it is important to reiterate that peace operations must be carried out in accordance with the basic principle of political impartiality, consent of the party, and non-use of force except for the self-defense and defense of the mandate. The promotion of protection of human rights remain primary responsibility of the host country. Therefore, the peace operation should support the host country in undertaking this responsibility in a constructive approach based on the mentioned principle and an awareness of economic, social, and cultural context of the local society. Second, the accuracy and relevance of information. Reports and analysis become influential through the process of promoting, monitoring, and composing policy. Therefore, the peace mission must prepare their works based on accurate, unbiased, balanced, and verifiable information. Besides, to avoid any overlapping with the work of the other United Nations agencies specialized in the promotion and protection of human rights, the scope of this information should fall within the boundary of peace operation mandates. Third, about the area of concentration, as can be seen in the latest report of the Secretary General, among others, 2019 is a year of suffering of civilians in armed conflict. Sexual violence remains a cruel tactic of war, and the refugee and IDPs recorded the highest number ever. In conflict, vulnerable persons suffer the most. Peace operations, which are mandated, should pay more considerable attention to the promotion and protection of the rights of these persons. Fourth, conduct during deployment. In the provision of the services, peacekeepers must be the champion of human rights adherence. We call on the mandated peace mission to strictly implement and observe the United Nations strategies and discipline to address all forms of misconduct. In this connection, we support the adequate preparation, special technical skills, and substantive knowledge on the matter to be well equipped for the peacekeeper, both pre and during deployment. Madam President, in conclusion, I would like to salute the great courage and contribution of United Nations peacekeepers who have spent their efforts and sacrifice to assist host country in navigating the long and challenging path from the armed conflict and instability to peace, especially in the face of current COVID-19 pandemic. I thank you, Madam President.
Thank you for this statement, and I give the floor to the representative of China.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I warmly welcome you to chair today's meeting. I thank High Commissioner Madame Bachelet and SRSG Mr. Shearer for their briefings. I have also listened very attentively to the remarks by Mr. Senga. The first UN peacekeeping operation was launched in 1948. Over the past 72 years, the mandates of UN peacekeeping have been broadened from monitoring ceasefire to comprehensive actions in the political and the security fields. It's now an important instrument for maintaining international peace and enhancing collective security. Promotion and protection of human rights is the common ideal of mankind, but it's only possible with peace and stability. As a powerful instrument of the Security Council to maintain international peace and security, peacekeeping operation has been playing an important role in upholding the rights to subsistence and the peace of people in host countries, and created basic conditions for realizing the right to development and the other human rights of the people of host countries. Regarding peace operations and human rights, I wish to share with you the following points. First, the objective of peace operations is to support political settlement of hotspot issues. Thus, when the Security Council sets the mandate of peacekeeping operations, the priority should be promoting political settlement. Whether human rights protection should be included in the mandate depends on the situation of each mission. Taking everything on board without prioritizing would make it hard for peacekeeping operations to achieve their main objective. We can see in Mali, South Sudan, that the issue of human rights is not the main reason behind the conflicts. Therefore, peacekeeping missions with human rights mandate should serve, not divert from the central task. Only by promoting peace process can we make the improvement of human rights possible. Second, the ownership of host countries must be fully respected in the implementation of human rights mandate. Human rights situations in different countries are in endless variety. Peacekeeping operations must strictly follow Security Council resolutions, fully communicate with host countries, and respect their unique circumstances. Meanwhile, governments of host countries have the primary responsibility of promoting and protecting human rights. Peace operations cannot replace governments nor parties to conflict in doing their job. They should create a favorable environment for relevant parties to promote and protect human rights. Third, peace operations should assist the country's response to COVID-19 to promote and protect people's rights to life and health. People are under serious threat of health in countries where health systems are weak, like South Sudan, Mali, and the DRC. Peacekeeping missions should, within their mandates, assist the governments in strengthening capacity building, help the governments and the people of host countries fight the pandemic, put people at the center, and safeguarding people's rights to life and health effectively. Fourth, peace operations should strengthen prevention and punishment to internal human rights violations. Human rights violations by peacekeeping personnel have been reported in recent years, undermining the image of peacekeeping operations and exposing the deficiencies in internal management. Peacekeeping operations, either deployed by the UN or regional organizations, should improve internal management, strengthen discipline, and effectively address and prevent such incidents to avoid negative influences. Madam President, China is the second largest contributor to UN peacekeeping budget and a major troop contributing country. Currently, more than 2,500 Chinese peacekeepers are serving in 9 UN mission areas. China attaches great importance to peacekeeping personnel capacity building. China provides strict pre-deployment training to ensure that peacekeepers better understand and respect the local people and their culture. Chinese peacekeepers are well displayed. They have successfully completed large numbers of peacekeeping tasks. Peace, development, and human rights are the 3 pillars of the UN and mutually reinforcing. Peace operations have the mission of peace, which facilitates development and the promotion of human rights. As the first country to sign the UN Charter, China remains true to its original aspiration and will continue to honor its commitments to multilateralism and contribute more to peacekeeping and the cause of human rights. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of China for his statement, and now I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Madam Minister. I welcome you chairing this important PTC. My thanks to Madam Bachelet, Mr. Shearer, Mr. Kitenge for their participation. Peacekeeping and peace operations are of the utmost importance today in ongoing challenging environment. These operations have always been seen as a pivotal activity of the United Nations in the area of maintaining peace and security. We pay tribute to the courage of more than 100,000 UN civilian, military, and police personnel who are currently serving worldwide on behalf of international community to protect peace and international law. We appreciate personal efforts of the Secretary General Antonio Guterres that he takes to ensure effective functioning of peacekeeping operations. No matter how peacekeeping reform proceeds in the future, what should stand at core of this process is the respect for sovereignty of host countries, compliance with the UN Charter, and adherence to the basic principles of peacekeeping, namely consent of the parties, impartiality, non-use of force except in self-defense, and defense of the mandate. Neutrality and mandate-oriented standard of conduct, respect for local customs and practices, culture, religion, traditions, all those postulates are well known and can keep peacekeepers away of a risk to be involved in conflict. We fully understand the importance of the human rights component in peacekeeping. Unfortunately, the topic of human rights has been extremely politicized. This is detrimental for trust of international community in UN human rights machinery and human rights as a whole. In such situation, the credibility and recognition of the peacekeeping missions and its human rights component are directly dependent on the decency of specific employees, their ability and desire to rely on objective information. Security Council is not a human rights body. Any attempt to squeeze somehow the topic of human rights per se into the Security Council agenda is encroaching on the prerogatives and mandates of the Human Rights Council, High Commissioner for Human Rights, and other relevant institutions. But splitting mandates is half the trouble. More concerning are attempts to use human rights as an instrument for exerting political and military pressure on other countries. We know examples of interventions for the sake of human rights and their devastating consequences. At the same time, the main objective of UN peacekeeping and political missions is to promote reconciliation and peacekeeping. Other tasks are auxiliary, including human rights component of mandates. They are designed to contribute to the achievement of the main goal and should not replace the priority areas of peace operations. It is necessary to carefully and responsibly approach the implementation of the human rights component in the activities of various United Nations structures, avoiding duplication of their functions. Excessive emphasis on human rights issues at the expense of other problems facing the international community today inevitably leads to an overload of the entire system and decrease in the efficiency of its work. Prevention and settlement of armed conflict are the main drivers for preventing human rights abuses and not vice versa. Human rights violations are not the cause of the conflict, but their consequence. The best contribution that the Security Council could make to protect human rights is that of working effectively on the main task to safeguard international peace and security in accordance with the Council's mandate and the United Nations Charter. I thank you very much.
Thank you for this statement, and now I give the floor to the representative of South Africa.
Madam Minister of Defense of Germany, Your Excellency Kramp-Karrenbauer, it is an honor to have you, Your Excellency, chair this debate. We view this debate as important not only due to its focus, but also because it is the first time that the Council discussed the topic of peace operations and human rights under the agenda item, peacekeeping. Madam President, my delegation is grateful for the briefing received from the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Madam Michelle Bachelet, the Special Representative for United Nations Secretary General for South Sudan and Head of United Nations Mission in South Sudan, UNMISS, Mr. David Shearer, as well as the civil society representative, Mr. Senga Dismas Kitenge, President Groupe LOTUS, based in Kisangani, the DRC. Madam President, our deliberation today are taking place at a time when the world is grappling with the COVID-19 pandemic, which has impacted on all of us, irrespective of our level of development and whether we are experiencing conflict or not. However, countries in conflict, where UN peacekeeping operations or special political missions have a presence, will require additional support to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 on populations' human rights as well as political and socio-economic rights. Madam President, The inclusion of human rights elements in numerous missions mandates established by this Council reflect its general acceptance of the relevance of human rights to peace and security efforts. South Africa notes with concern that the subject of these human rights elements has not escaped the political dynamics of this Council, as it continues to be politicized and applied selectively. While some members of the Security Council advocate for the importance of the human rights component in peacekeeping missions, it is regrettable that the same vigor and enthusiasm is conspicuously absent in other missions, such as the United Nations Mission for the Referendum in Western Sahara, MINURSO. Madam President, we must not put ourselves on the wrong side of history by allowing our narrow interests to trample over the interests of the majority of the world citizens. In this Council is mandated to serve, particularly those in conflict situations during this global crisis. This Council should commit to implement protection of civilians' mandates of peacekeeping missions when required, in accordance with the UN Charter, missions mandate, and applicable international law without fear, favor, or prejudice. Madam President, in line with the principles under the Action for Peacekeeping A4P, an initiative launched by the U.S. Secretary General to refocus peacekeeping with more targeted mandates, make peacekeeping operations stronger and safer, as well as mobilize support for political solutions and better equipped and trained forces. South Africa wishes to highlight that the pursuit of sustainable political solutions should guide the design and the deployment of UN peacekeeping operations. The lasting progress in strengthening security, national reconciliation, the rule of law, human rights, and sustainable development needs to occur in parallel, not sequenced, but in parallel. Madam President, indeed, the host country bears the primary responsibility to protect civilians. In this regard, we wish to stress the contribution that peacekeeping operations, where mandates can make to international efforts to protect civilians and to promote and protect human rights. The protection of women and children as the most vulnerable in this context is paramount. Such protection can be enhanced through the involvement of women and girls to peace-building processes, which remains undervalued and under-resourced, leaving a vital tool regarding transformative change and sustainable peace under-scrutinized. Madam President, the inclusion, training, and support of the 7 missions with women protection advisors responsible for monitoring, analyzing, and reporting on conflict-related sexual violence, CRVs, including in MINUSCA, MINUSCO, UNAMID, UNSOM, and USMIL, as David Shearer was saying, is a step in the right direction. But what about other regions of the world, Madam President? Don't we need women protection advisors in the other 10 conflict situations worldwide? In our continent, the AU insists with these issues, and the African Women Leadership Network remains our conscience in the continent in dealing with these matters. The creation of a gender unit in 9 peacekeeping operations with the leadership team to ensure that women's rights and women peace and security agenda are mainstreamed into all missions activities is a welcome progress as we mark the 20th anniversary of the landmark Resolution 1325 and Beijing Plus 25. It is clear that the effective implementation of the women peace and security agenda directly contribute to the objectives of long-term global peace and security. Madam President, peacekeeping operations is mandated to monitor and report. However, if human human rights violations fall outside of the scope of the protection of civilians, it may be difficult for peacekeeping operations to intervene without appropriate mandate. Sharing of the best practices and lessons learned among council members is important, and the experiences of the major TCC/PCC about integrating human rights aspect of the mandates into the work of and operations on the ground is crucial. In conclusion, Madam President, SADC wishes to highlight the positive contributions special political missions and peacekeeping operations can make in their peace-building mandates, in sharing expertise in building institutions responsible for the promotion of human rights in collaboration with host countries. This approach can go a long way in peace building and peace sustenance efforts, including in the promotion of human rights when working in tandem with national institutions and civil society, including grassroots community-based organizations. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of South Africa for his statement, and now I pass the floor to Estonia.
Thank you, Madam President. I thank Germany for convening today's debate. I believe that human rights are directly linked to the maintenance of peace and security and the work of this Council, including with respect to peace operations. I thank all briefers for their presence and presentation. Peace operations would not be able to fulfill their mandates effectively if they ignored the issue of the protection and promotion of human rights. On one hand, violations against human rights can foretell and drive conflicts, and they are regrettably their constant feature. On the other hand, peace operations are one of the Council's most powerful tools to manage conflicts. Human rights are also a part of the protection of civilians' mandates given to most missions by the Council to help those most vulnerable in conflict. Peace missions can be helpful interlocutors in a dialogue with governments as well as civil society. We underline the key role of the human rights components in the UN missions and the strong support lent by OHCHR. I take this opportunity to thank High Commissioner Bachelet and her team for their work in this regard. Women and dedicated child protection advisors play an important role and complementary role in protecting and promoting human rights. We note the importance of the cooperation between the human rights and protection advisors and believe that all those components should be sufficiently funded. However, we also believe that a whole of mission approach, the cooperation between the human rights officers and the military and police staff, is key to making a real difference. We welcome the good examples shared in this regard. Similarly, it is a question of mission leadership. Human rights should be part of the mission management and at the highest level. We do not need human rights protection as a token add-on with no real impact, but an integral part of force generation, mission planning, management, and oversight and evaluation. We note the steps towards greater coherence in this regard. Sufficient and practice-oriented pre-deployment training is one of the key elements here. In the context of COVID-19, training and knowledge of the protection and promotion of human rights in practice helps missions better support countries dealing with the pandemic. We also stress the importance of applying a gender perspective to the human rights-related activities of the peace missions and to the missions as a whole. In parallel, we underline the need for the observance of human rights by the UN peace operations themselves, including by addressing all instances of sexual exploitation and abuse. We value the exchange we have had today and look forward to following up on this topic in our future discussions. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you for your statement. And now I would like to give the floor to Belgium.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you to the briefers. Human rights and peace and security are closely intertwined throughout the whole conflict cycle. Indeed, human rights violations and abuses can be both root causes and consequences of conflict. As such, respect for human rights and guaranteed protection of civilians are cornerstones of sustainable peace. We therefore warmly welcome this initiative by Germany to underscore the role of peace missions in protecting human rights. The missions have important added value because they can, 1, identify violations and abuses, 2, they can prevent them, and 3, they help build capacity in their operational context. So first, identifying violations. Human rights components in peacekeeping operations play a crucial role in monitoring and reporting of violations of international humanitarian, human rights, and refugee law. They serve as eyes and ears on the ground, exposing the gravity and scale of threats that escape the attention of other actors. 2, preventing violations. Peace missions also have the ability to make context-sensitive and forward-looking threats assessment, enabling them to prevent atrocities or mitigate their impact, in line with the protection mandates most have. Comprehensive threat assessment is only possible with trained staff, though, and good cooperation between the mission and the Human Rights Office and UN country team. 3, capacity building. The human rights due diligence policy is an essential tool for missions to support host country security forces in their respect for human rights. A few years of practice have learned us that due diligence policy is also relevant in terms of transition planning and exit strategy. So when, for example, the UN and the DRC authorities define benchmarks for a responsible exit of MONUSCO, surely lessons can be drawn from the human rights due diligence policy on security sector reform. Madam President, human rights are not an add-on for the missions. They are core business. If we are serious about this, we must mandate the missions accordingly. We must staff them accordingly, and we must budget them accordingly. That is part of our Action for Peacekeeping commitment. Human rights components are key in engaging communities and local stakeholders in support of mandate implementation and increase mission credibility across the board. For instance, in Afghanistan, where UNAMA's human rights components work contributed to building confidence between parties of the conflict, a condition for inclusive intra-Afghan negotiations. Dedicated women protection advisors and child protection advisors are indispensable to fulfill important protection mandates. Consolidation of human rights components in mandates and in resource negotiations cannot come at the expense of such capacity. We have learned from experience that mandates, guidance, and policy briefs do not automatically translate into operational human rights readiness for military personnel. We must train Blue Helmets before and during deployment with due attention for methodologies applicable in a mission context. Close cooperation between the military, police, and civilian components, as well as the sharing of best practices between missions, could improve human rights readiness. We also advocate for adequate regional attention to human rights. The European Union has extensive human rights components in civilian and military missions. The African Union has its human rights missions as well. And we would like to encourage the G5 Joint Force to strengthen the implementation of the Human Rights Compliance Framework, supported by the Office of the High Commissioner through national presence. Madam President, in conclusion, we would like to seize the opportunity to honor the men and women who tirelessly work to advance human rights in the field, despite numerous risks, including new challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. For example, in MONUSCO, the Human Rights Office has continued its work in support of national authorities to improve respect for human rights in the fight against impunity. Its COVID-19 response entailed adequate attention to cope with domestic violence or overcrowding in prisons. It is an example of UN peacekeepers and civilian personnel's dedication that we are grateful for. I thank you.
Thank you for this statement. And now let me pass the floor to the representative of the United States of America.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, High Commissioner Bachelet and Special Representative Shearer and Mr. Kitenge. It is critical that the Security Council hears from civil society, including human rights defenders, and I'm particularly grateful today that we were able to hear from Mr. Kitenge's insights. The COVID-19 pandemic has created unprecedented challenges to UN peacekeeping missions around the world. Mandates are being reprioritized as peacekeeping operations shift to focus on COVID-19 response. In light of this, it is essential that peacekeeping continues to protect and to promote human rights. Human rights are universal, and defending them is non-negotiable. That's why 154 member states, including the United States, endorsed the Secretary's Declaration of Shared Commitments. These commitments, in part, recognize that lasting progress in human rights is fundamental to advancing political solutions to conflict. Integrating human rights into peacekeeping enhances the impact of peacekeepers while helping conflicts recede. Peacekeeping missions monitoring and reporting on human rights violations is essential to creating the conditions for accountability, justice, and eventually peace. These missions must work with host nations to develop human rights vetting procedures that build post-conflict security institutions that help sustain that peace. We fully support the Human Rights Division's Joint Protection Teams and Mixed Gender Engagement Teams in peacekeeping missions. Although some members of this council regularly attempt to cut human rights officers and funding from peacekeeping budgets, the Trump administration will continue to advocate for their retention. Their work is simply vital. These peacekeeping missions have clear mandates to engage in the promotion of human rights, and we have an obligation to support them in doing their work. There are several peacekeeping missions doing excellent work in the protection and promotion of human rights. First, we would like to highlight the innovative and steadfast efforts of the Human Rights Division in UNMISS to release women and children from captivity, document violations, and support South Sudan's nascent institutions to respect human rights. These efforts are life-saving, and the United States fully supports them. MINUSMA's Human Rights Division has documented and reported on Central Mali on government forces violations in the region. This is the first step to tackling impunity and holding governments accountable. The United States values the independence and candor in this human rights reporting. Only when we improve accountability can we rebuild trust between Malians and their government. MINUSCA, jointly with UNDP, supports the Central African Republic's Ministry of Interior and Internal Security Forces with a vetting process that recruits police and staff. For police recruits and staff. The application of the United Nations Human Rights Due Diligence Policy is fundamental in this regard. Through this collaboration, the UN ensures that their support to CAR's justice and correction sectors is in compliance with international human rights standards. As Mr. Kitenge noted, armed groups and Congolese security forces have repeatedly violated human rights in the DRC. We are encouraged by increased judicial accountability for wrongdoing and expect to see more progress in this area. We encourage other members of the international community to join us in supporting efforts in the DRC and the region to hold violators responsible for their actions. We also believe it is necessary
You are the only
to
participant.
increase women's meaningful participation in peacekeeping missions, and the United States continues to push for increase in recruitment. Women peacekeepers offer unique skill sets, perspectives, and opportunities for engagement that can make peace operations with a civilian protection mandate more successful. Missions with protection of civilian mandates often face challenging decisions on ways to respond to threats against civilians. Real-time cooperation and information sharing between missions component is critical to facilitating the timely identification, prevention, and mitigation of threats to civilians and human rights abuses. There is room for greater integration among civilian and military mission components. This integration should take place among the mission's various analytical and reporting cells with non-governmental organizations and the UN country team. Integrating human rights into peacekeeping is essential to building the conditions to sustain peace. We cannot lose sight of this. As we reprioritize mandates, it will be important to fully support the protection and promotion of human rights so that those living in conflict-affected areas can have a better future for themselves and for their children. In the end, this work is critically important for creating a more peaceful world, and it helps us to live up to the high expectations the world has for this council. We must support and fulfill this mission. Thank you very much. Thank you, Minister.
I thank the representative of the United States of America for her statement, and now I give the floor to the representative of the Dominican Republic.
Thank you, Madam President. We would like to welcome today's briefers, High Commissioner Bachelet, SRSG Shearer, and Mr. Kitenge, who have enlightened the Council on such an important topic this morning. The Dominican Republic strongly supports any action, policy, and strategy for the protection of human rights. Protecting people from human rights violations is directly linked to preserving human dignity. Therefore, as a nation, we will always promote their recognition and safeguard. It is undeniable that human rights are key to the maintenance of international peace and security. There is no peace and there is no progress in a society where human rights are not protected. Furthermore, the development of tools to achieve effective protection of human rights, especially in places where there is armed conflict, shows the undeniable link between the protection of human rights, accountability, and reconciliation as key items to eradicate conflict and to attain sustainable peace. That is not an easy task. Great challenges still await our full commitment and cooperation. We recognize the commendable work done by the human rights components of peace operations in monitoring human rights violations, investigation of perpetrators, assistance to victims, conflict management, and reconciliation. We would like to highlight the paramount role that UN peacekeeping play in protecting civilians in armed conflict. And in this regard, it is important that every peace mission counts with child protection advisors, women protection advisors, and gender protection advisors, both civilians and military, and that these are well equipped, adequately funded, and be given the level of seniority needed to carry out their work. Their work is essential not only to the maintenance of international peace and security, but touches personally and individually the lives of each of the victims who find in said components a light in the dark. Madam President, we would like to specially highlight the SG Initiative Action for Peacekeeping, A4P, launched in 2018. As a direct result of action for peacekeeping, the declaration of shared commitments was put forward. We commend the more than 150 member states that have now joined us in endorsing it, showing their strong dedication to the set of key priorities that build on both new commitments and existing work streams. As a central element when speaking about human rights components in peacekeeping operations, the Dominican Republic would like to underscore the importance of appropriate training. This, we believe, is a stepping stone in the efficacy of the operations and is an issue that must not be left sidelined. We need tailored training to specific missions and to integrate the practical trainings needs that have been previously identified on the ground. Without this basic principle, we worry that the deployment of said operation could be hampered by the lack of preparedness and experience. In this regard, we are of the firm belief that appropriate funding should be allocated for training and pre-deployment preparations, as well as the required equipment to meet the constant threats peacekeepers face. Amid the COVID-19 pandemic, human rights principles must prevail and be respected across the spectrum, including economic and social rights, and civil and political rights. To protect them will be fundamental to the successes of the public health response. International cooperation is now more relevant than ever. We must come together to ensure the continuity of the good and necessary work of the human rights component despite all challenges, and together build a lasting peace. Thank you.
Thank you for your statement. And now I give the floor to the representative of France.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Je remercie la présidence allemande pour l'organisation de ce débat et je salue votre présence, Madame la Ministre. Je remercie également Madame Bachelet, Monsieur Shearer et Monsieur Kitenge pour leurs interventions. Le Covid-19 illustre l'imbrication entre droits de l'homme, développement et paix. Les progrès doivent se dessiner en parallèle sur ces fronts. C'est pourquoi le Conseil de sécurité doit prendre en compte les droits économiques et sociaux comme civils et politiques quand il s'acquitte de son mandat. La protection des droits de l'homme n'est pas un objectif en soi. Elle contribue aussi à une consolidation de la paix effective. Le mandat sur les droits de l'homme que nous confions aux opérations de paix doit être une partie intégrante de la stratégie conduite par le représentant spécial ou l'envoyé spécial, en lien avec les équipes pays des Nations Unies et les autorités nationales. Cette stratégie doit reposer sur un dialogue inclusif avec toutes les composantes de la société, femmes, jeunes, défenseurs des droits humains, groupes marginalisés, pour traiter les causes profondes des conflits et prévenir des crises. C'est le sens de la réforme menée par le secrétaire général que nous soutenons pleinement. L'inclusion des femmes dans les processus de paix doit cesser d'être un slogan, elle doit devenir une réalité. Je veux saluer les composantes droits de l'homme qui remplissent des fonctions essentielles. Par leur rôle d'alerte, en République démocratique du Congo, le plan Chabunda, lancé en réaction à des enquêtes menées par la MONUSCO, a permis l'arrestation d'un chef de groupe armé responsable d'exactions. Par l'appui aux autorités nationales, au Mali, la division des droits de l'homme apporte un appui indispensable aux enquêtes nationales. En Centrafrique, la MINUSCA a soutenu la création de la Cour pénale spéciale, dont les premières enquêtes sur des violations graves ont été lancées. La responsabilité première incombe aux États hôtes, sans lesquels il ne saurait y avoir de protection des droits de l'homme effective. Par leur intégration aux communautés locales aussi, sur laquelle reposent les mécanismes d'alerte précoce pour la protection des civils. Par leur accès aux victimes, qui doit permettre de trouver des réponses à leurs demandes de réparation. Le Fonds global pour les survivants, que la France soutient, devrait pouvoir s'appuyer sur l'expertise des opérations de paix. Pour s'acquitter de ce mandat exigeant, les opérations de paix doivent être dotées des compétences et des ressources nécessaires. L'exemplarité des Nations Unies et de ses casques bleus est cruciale. Y contribuer est une priorité pour la France. Je voudrais rappeler l'importance que nous attachons à la politique de tolérance zéro pour les abus sexuels. Nous souscrivons à la procédure de certification des unités militaires nationales désignées pour servir en opération et rappelons l'importance d'une formation adéquate pour prévenir les violences sexuelles. La France forme chaque année 30 000 soldats africains francophones amenés à être déployés en opération de maintien de la paix. La formation inclut le droit international humanitaire et les droits de l'homme. La France soutient par ailleurs le renforcement du rôle des organisations régionales dans ce domaine. C'est pourquoi des conseillers juridiques sont placés auprès des missions de formation européennes au Mali, en Centrafrique, dans la mission de l'OTAN en Irak et du G5 Sahel. Je tiens à rappeler l'importance de la politique de diligence en matière de droits de l'homme suivie par les Nations Unies dans leur coopération avec les forces non onusiennes. C'est un enjeu de crédibilité mais aussi d'efficacité. Au Sahel, la mise en œuvre du cadre de conformité aux droits de l'homme est indissociable de l'opérationnalisation de la force conjointe. À cet égard, nous saluons l'action du Haut Commissariat. Il ne fait pas de doute que le strict respect du droit international humanitaire et des droits de l'homme est une condition du succès de la lutte contre le terrorisme et du maintien de la paix. Cela passe par un dialogue sur les droits de l'homme qui doit être continu et constructif, tourné vers les solutions pour permettre aux États de répondre aux besoins de sécurité, de justice et de prospérité de leur population. Je vous remercie, Madame la Présidente.
Merci. I thank the representative of France for his statement, and I thank you all for your comments, for your statements, for the question raised. And now I shall now give the floor again to the High Commissioner Bachelet to respond to these questions or comments. High Commissioner Bachelet, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Minister. I think as has been a very important debate where everyone has addressed the importance of human rights to ensure peace and security and also to ensure development. It's clear for me that the human rights are in the root causes, but also on the consequences of conflict. But it's not only about, and we all have discussed the importance and the relationship between the three pillars and the three aspects, and the importance and what can the human rights component provide and support on the mission, and of course also Special Representative David Shearer explaining in this situation. But we also identify that it's important not only to report and monitor, of course, the human rights violation and the abuses of the armed groups and non-state actors, but also, of course, to develop and work in analyzing like a human rights-based approach that will permit you identify which can be the most vulnerable. And that is always important, in particular now that we're living in the context of COVID-19, when we have identified which are the most vulnerable and how we can have in the response to the crisis, but particularly afterwards in the recovery, how we ensure policies that really target these groups, otherwise they are going to be left behind. And one of the problems that you usually have with countries is the data is not disaggregated. So it's something is very important also, and we are working with the UN country teams and the UN system to support that and to work with governments to support their capacities on identifying the people who need more. The other thing I wanted to mention is that this year we'll have the anniversary, 20 years of anniversary of the 1325 Women, Peace and Security Resolution. And all of you have mentioned the importance of women. As peacekeepers, in my experience, having been UN women, I saw also how women in the communities will feel so empowered when they saw these women police forces or armed forces. They also felt that they can also reach them easily to get to I would say, share the concerns, speak about the issues, but also as a good role model for those women and their children. And of course, women and child advisors are essential. But one of you mentioned something that is clear, having been myself Minister of Defense as well, is that you need to win the hearts and the mind of the people. Not always military actions are the ones who solve everything. And for that, you need to address root causes and inequalities. And if something has laid bare the COVID-19 is that inequalities exist. They are profound. They have been aggravated by the COVID-19, and we were not prepared. And that has meant that some of the people in their communities has been much more affected. As we said always, the virus does not discriminate, but the impacts do differently to different people. And finally, I will mention something that David mentioned as well, the importance of accountability. When there's no accountability, there's impunity. I mean, it's very difficult to change issues like gender-based violence, sexual violence, because so we need accountability. We need to hold perpetrators accountable, because that's the only way to understand that these kind of things are not acceptable. And finally, I want to say that of course, it's needed to work with all stakeholders, and my office works, of course, with government, but also with civil society, with faith leaders as well, with everyone who can play a private sector, everyone who can play an important role in two areas: national ownership. And when we speak about national ownership, we're not talking only about governmental ownership. We're talking about national. I mean, all the stakeholders in a nation are important, and we believe that it's essential to ensure not only capacity building, but the commitment and engagement of all who are involved in this. So thank you so much for this opportunity, and to hear all your comments, all your questions, your comments, and of course of David Shearer and Mr. Kitenge. Thank you.
I thank you, High Commissioner, for your clarifications, and I shall now give the floor again to Special Representative Shearer to respond to the comments and questions raised. Mr. Shearer, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Well, first of all, just to say we're very grateful for putting this topic on the agenda. As I said in my statement, this is part of our one of the key planks of our mandate, but also it's cross-cutting right throughout our mission. I think it was the ambassador for Belgium who talked about human rights being both root causes and consequences of conflict, and that's exactly what the situation here is in South Sudan. with some of the ongoing violence that's happening. It is the root causes that are causing ongoing violence and also creating the consequences at the same time. I just want to reinforce just the 3 points that I made about the need for accountability and ensuring that we call out perpetrators, that we speak out when human rights are committed, because as a UN body we can do that, whereas many other people in South Sudan in particular, but all across the world, don't have the strength or the ability to do that, or fearful if they do speak out, and that's important. But also the other part of that is to make sure that we follow up with engagement and ending impunity. So we look at reinforcing the local structures, particularly the justice sector, and ensuring that that works so that we have abusers and perpetrators brought to justice, and that we engage with the government. And not only the government, actually, as Madame Bachelet just talked about, civil society in South Sudan, the churches, because if we're able to, if we engage with them and are able to work with them, then we have a much greater possibility of getting lasting and sustainable change. Just to finish off, I mean, as I've said before, our Human Rights Division works independently with UNMISS, but of course it reports both jointly to me and to the High Commissioner for Human Rights as well. So we have a unique situation, as most of you are aware, of both reporting to Geneva and reporting here locally in Juba. And that gives us a strength, I think, of being able to both speak out in a broader sense than perhaps what we would have been able to do if it was just within the mission. And actually it helps us often when we're having to talk about controversial issues. We're able to lean on the High Commissioner for Human Rights to help us get the message across. And then lastly, there was a lot of discussion about and mention of women peacekeepers, and I just wanted to say, yes, please, as many as you can possibly put in peacekeeping operations. They do have a unique opportunity to engage with local communities. They are a role model for many people, but unfortunately, although we talk about them, we are getting only a handful coming through from a lot of the troop contributing countries. We have better possibilities with police. And police were up to more than 20% of our policing now are women. And I just want to say, when you see women walking through, although unfortunately with COVID now there's less chance of doing this, but if you see them walking through our POC sites, our protection of civilian sites, talking and engaging with other women and with children, you understand how what a profound impact they have in the mission, and how they can both get information, put across messages in a way that men can't. And for that reason, I would really reinforce that call for more women in both the troop and police contributing countries to step up the numbers of women. So thank you once again, Madam President, Minister. We're very, very pleased that you are able to have this discussion today, and we're very, very happy to participate. We appreciate it. Thank you very much.
I thank you, Special Representative Shearer, for your remarks, and I would like to give the floor again to Dismas Kitenge to respond to the comments and as well as to the questions. Mr. Kitenge, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The situation in the DRC deserves to be followed and viewed not as a photo, but more as a movie with several episodes, some worrying and other promising. We must invest in the training of men, in the internalization of human rights value and cultures, and in the strengthening of democratic institutions and the rule of law to fight against injustices, extreme poverty, and the lust of other states. That the unity of human rights in peace missions constitutes an essential pillar to privilege and strengthen. And I can speak in French to conclude. Donc, l'unité des droits humains, comme je disais, c'est un pilier essentiel pour privilégier et construire les relations. Mais aussi, cette unité des droits humains elle constitue aussi un lien important de l'implication, non seulement des États, mais aussi des peuples. Il constitue aussi un des objectifs clés de la mission des Nations Unies, puisqu'il ne faut pas que les Nations Unies, à travers les missions, soient toujours perçues comme une affaire des États, mais aussi une affaire de peuples. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Monsieur Kitenge, for your clarifications, and merci beaucoup pour votre travail si important. I would like to thank all briefers and the council members for their active contributions to the session. Allow me to make a short statement in my capacity as Federal Minister of Defense of Germany. It was a true pleasure to chair my first Security Council meeting and to discuss the pertinent topic of peace operations and human rights. We discussed the central role that UN peace operations play in promoting and protecting human rights. Let's jointly enable this important work through effective UN missions. And let me once again underline that human rights need to be respected in every aspect of our lives and our work. We, the United Nations Security Council, we as nations should not accept that human rights violations are used as a tool for self-seeking power plays. Attacks on human rights or on those who protect them are to be condemned. Perpetrators are to be made accountable without exception. I hereby resume my function as President of the Council. There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers. The meeting is adjourned.